Hey everybody, today I've got another T-44 game for you. The T-44 is a very nice tank. It's one of my favourite tier 8s, but I don't really play it that much anymore, simply because there's just so many tier 10s on West you don't often get a decent match in it. But in this case I was lucky and ended up in a match which was almost solely tier 8s, with a couple of 7s and 6s down the bottom for good measure. Platooned up with Unlucky in his IS-3 and Rothmog in an STA-1, and we've ended up on the west spawn of Fjords. Not a bad start. I decide no point fixing something if it's not broken, so I head north up towards the A-line to try and get some quick eyes on A8, A9, and possibly push through depending what the enemy send down there. They do have a Type 59 and a T-69, which could be a problem if they come charging through. But if they don't actually push through the north pass, then we should be able to get some work done up there. We hit the A9 hill without actually spotting anything, which probably means their mediums have abandoned this flank. Normally if they were going to come up here they would have been spotted by now. I make the move to the corner and run face first into an FCM. Certainly not a bad thing to see. He doesn't have the armor to bounce me unless I accidentally hit him in the gun mantlet. And although he does have mobility, he's terrible, so he's not going to use it. If he was an actual decent player, he probably would be using the FCM's medium-like mobility against us, but instead he decides to trade shots in the open, thinking he's driving a real heavy. The T-32 is a much bigger problem, because unlike the FCM, he does actually have armor. He also hits a little bit harder. The T-32's turret is basically impenetrable, even from the sides to a tier 8, but its hull is actually a lot thicker than it seems to be, just because of the really aggressive angling of the upper plate. Fighting a T-32 on a hill, even if it's not technically hull down, is a real pain. You're going to have a lot of trouble punching through that hull plate, and you'll end up either needing to go to goal just to guarantee you get through, or try and bait it onto flat ground where you can get better angles, particularly in a Soviet medium where you don't have the gun depression to really deal with it on a hill. Bad angle there. Of course, he was actually angled to me from a top-down perspective as well as being on a slope, so that wasn't likely to go through. At this point I'm just trying some harassing fire on him to see where I can get shots in. Obviously the MG port on the hull there is a weak spot, it is on most tanks. Unlucky just punches one straight through his cupola. Unfortunately I hit a candy wrapper on the ground and my gun bounced up from lack of gun depression. That shot was aimed at his hull, but because I hit a piece of bad terrain it went straight into his gun mantlet and got eaten. Thankfully though, we're able to take him down. T-29 takes down the FCM, and then Unlucky and myself start working on the Tiger, who is finished by the T-29. A cool 2500 damage already, not bad. The enemy heavies could quite easily have given us problems up here, except they elected to fall back and shoot from the near side of a ridge, instead of either hulling down on the top of it and forcing us to come to them, or pushing down to the hill we were on and basically brawling with us. Up in our faces like that, we wouldn't have been able to do much about them. And then the FCM could have actually used its mobility a bit. However, I'm not going to complain about bad heavy drivers when they're on the enemy team, because they give me lots of nice damage. I've long been of the opinion, and this has been reinforced very strongly by the behaviour of pubbies during these missions, that heavy tank drivers are by far the dirtiest, filthiest kind of pond scum in the fetid swamp of human shit that is World of Tanks. They are the dumbest people. They have incredibly slow reflexes. They routinely hide behind medium and light tanks, you know, with no regard for their own role. They drive out in front of friendly tanks. They push people out of cover because they think they deserve it more. They're just hideous. Heavy drivers have this really weird sense of entitlement because they have a big tank, they're the big boss, and so quite often they'll try and call a battle for a team even if they're a 43%er. They'll shove mediums out of positions they think they deserve more, and they'll just generally do stupid shit, and very, very often they'll just drive into the open thinking that their armor will block everything. That's not how heavy tanks work. They have weak spots just like anything else. And so the event of bad heavy drivers being on the enemy team rather than my own is always pleasant. In this case, I had Unlucky with me and the T-29, who, you know, may not be technically a good player looking at his overall stats, but he performed well enough up north. He didn't get in anybody's way. He knocked out 2 tanks. He put in his share of damage. So I won't complain about him. And then the other heavies were an unknown quantity, but they were down south, so they weren't my problem. In any case, I just figured I would get some more T-44 up because there's not nearly enough of it on my channel. I can't even actually remember when I did my last T-44 replay. I think it would have been like 6 months ago or something now. But it's always nice to have a couple of easy matches in this tank. It was one of the sort of earlier bullshit tanks in that when the game was still in beta and the netcode was really wonky, you could not hit a moving T-44. You just couldn't. Especially because everyone was playing on the EU server. There was no NA server at that point. And so everyone had pings of at least about 150. I had a ping of about 400. And the netcode was really badly written. So you would see tanks teleporting 10, 20 meters at a time if they were moving at a distance of any kind of speed. So T-44s would basically just teleport right up to you, and you wouldn't be able to hit them on the way in, even with auto-aim, and then just circle around you, murdering the shit out of you. And back then, of course, they were actually really, really hard to pen because there wasn't any power creep. Nowadays, it's mellowed out a bit. That sort of role has been taken over a bit by the T-54, but even the T-54's fallen down in that recently, just because of the proliferation of high-pen guns and, of course, the recent nerfs to its armor. But the T-44 is still a pretty strong contender. What it's lost in direct fighting ability, due to its comparative lack of armor and its relatively weak gun, it's got excellent scouting capability because it still has really good camo. It's a really squat, low-to-the-ground tank. Its view range isn't the best, but if you slap some optics on it, it's not too bad. As you can see from the little view range circles in the mini-map there, with optics and a decent crew, I don't even think this crew's got the view range skills fully trained, you can get quite a good view range out of this little guy, and combine that with its camo and its mobility, you can use it quite effectively as a scout. As I've demonstrated before in tier 10 games, where the gun isn't sufficient, the scouting capability is, and you can rack up some pretty impressive amounts of spotting damage with the T-44 without getting blown up. How its role will change when the view range nerf hits medium tanks, I am not sure. We'll have to wait and see, but I'm hoping that they go easy on the T-44, remembering that it doesn't really have a sufficient gun to engage a lot of tier 10 tanks. And the map design just doesn't allow the kind of flanking you need to be able to do in mediums. Some of the maps are better for it than others, but you know, you have so many 3-lane Dota maps in this game, it sometimes can be pretty frustrating as a medium driver when there's an E100 blocking each of the 3 lanes and you have no way around it, except to just drive at it and pray it misses and then try and get under its gun. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I wish you the best of luck in the field, and I'll see you on the next one.